everybody. So I am Dr. Alexandra Mayer, and welcome back. Our channel is for resources for women, all things women's health. And today we have a very, very, very special guest. Kelli is a metabolism guru. That's how I explain her to my patients. And I have actually personally been working with Kelli for the last 18 months. I work with her on a ton of patient cases, especially hard metabolic cases. And this is going to be a first of a series Kelli and I are doing. But today we're going to be talking about training for the female cycle. So welcome, Kelli.
Hi. Thanks, Dr. Alex.
Yes.
So I'm Kelli Michelle with Keep Moving Forward. My degree is in nutrition science. Just started my PhD doctoral courses. That's an interesting conglomeration of responsibilities. But at any rate, I'm super excited to be on today. Thanks for having me, Dr. Alex.
Oh my gosh, thank you for coming. The knowledge that you bring to my patients with your master's in nutrition is beyond. And so I'm really, really excited to talk about this topic. So training for the female cycle, I think it's something that a lot of people don't really pay attention to, and a lot of women don't pay any attention to. We kind of assume that we're like men, right? Where our hormones just stay, we know our hormones shift throughout the month, but where you think that your training ability and your ability to lift, your ability to recover, your ability to lose fat all stays stable throughout the month. And it does not. And so kind of give us an idea of what you talk to about your clients when it comes to this.
Yeah, so I approach it with pretty much every female client that I have that is active. And I think it's important to define training, right? Mm-hmm. So first, let's define what training is for most people, because we've got endurance athletes and we've got people who do weight training, bodybuilding style. We've got CrossFitters, we've got people who do circuit training and things like that. So the level of intensity is different for each client. So unanimously, when I get CrossFit athletes, bodybuilders, people who have had the prior mentality of do more because it's going to be much better, that's where we have to really focus in on women and talk to them about, you are not little men.
Yes.
You are not a little man, okay? As far as I'm concerned, we are different. We have different chromosomes. We've got different hormones, different levels. Mm-hmm. And again, the two most important, obviously, followed by the third that I love the most, which is testosterone, are estrogen and progesterone. Mm-hmm. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, Dr. Alex? And then I'll tell you kind of how I design the nutrition plan and training around the female cycle, the Venus week.
Yeah, definitely. So when I'm talking to my females about training, a lot of what I'm paying attention to is those changes in testosterone that happen throughout the cycle. So we know that testosterone is not the same throughout the female cycle, and that your ability to recover and lose fat is going to be way better in the beginning part of the cycle. So first of all, we should start by kind of saying, what's a cycle? Because a lot of women don't really know. So the cycle comes from the first day of your period to the first day of your next period. So the first day is day one, and then the day before your next day one would be however long your cycle is. Mm-hmm. And a normal cycle is about 21 to 28 days, right? It does 21 to 35 days, 21 being short, 35 being fairly long, but anywhere in that window is still considered kind of a normal cycle. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we're talking to women about this, so testosterone changes throughout the cycle, and so does both estrogen and progesterone. So yes, we know that estrogen is very important for building that uterine lining at the beginning of the cycle. And so estrogen is actually going to be the highest in the first part of the cycle. That's when it's when it goes up, and then you start to grow that uterine lining. And then it's not until you ovulate that you create progesterone. So progesterone is actually created by what's left behind. So there's the corpus luteum, and then progesterone is created by that corpus luteum once you ovulate and release an egg. That's one of the number one misconceptions that I find when patients come in my office. They're like, oh, well, my progesterone is low, and so I just need progesterone. Well, if you're young and your progesterone is low, you need to check and see if you ovulated, because if you're not ovulating, you're not creating progesterone. And so I think that's something that's missed.
Yes,
so when
100%. Mm-hmm. I see that a lot.
Yeah, and it's always so surprising to me with doctors how quick they are to just be like, okay, you're low progesterone, but they're low enough that they're clearly not ovulating, and we need to back up like 10 steps and
Mhm,
focus on how do you reset that ovulatory cycle.
mhm.
Um,
Yes,
a lot of women don't realize that they can have anovulatory cycles, which is where you don't actually ovulate, but you can still have a period normal and have a normal.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, and then so
So
and oh,
So finish up what you were going to say, and then I'll just talk a little bit about the nutrition side of the progesterone estrogen cycle.
yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Because in the second half, when progesterone's high, right, we know that
Yep.
progesterone is a nice calming hormone, but we also know that progesterone can cause us to have a little bit more bloating as women and can
Yep.
cause us to hold on to a little bit more water. And so when you're training, right, one of the things that you definitely open my eyes to is that if you're doing heavier weights, right, you're going to hold on to water for a couple more days. Well, in the
Mhm.
progesterone phase, when progesterone's a little bit higher, that might be even a little bit worse than it would have been in the beginning half of the cycle.
You are right. Yep. It's pretty cool too, because all these hormones have such a special duty, if you will, or many duties. And so like we look at progesterone, which, is pretty dominant that last half of the cycle there.
Mhm.
When progesterone's up, we actually can utilize carbs more readily, more glucose during that time frame. So like a lot of women think that their cravings are because they're in PMS, but it's not. It's just
Mhm.
that their metabolic rate is higher. And then that metabolic rate starts to drop once they cycle. Their BMI actually decreases at menses. And then about a week, um, usually a week before ovulation in the follicular phase, I feed a little bit more fat and carbs than I normally would. And then I taper it back right before they cycle. So coming out of the cycle when they're in this, what I call Venus phase. So day one is the day that you start your cycle. Day two, you're still feeling pretty exhausted,
Mhm.
more prone to holding on to water weight. Probably shouldn't weigh yourself on the scale if you know it's going to upset your day. Day three and day four, you're like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better now. Well, that's physiological. And again, that's hormonal. Um, we are now going to go into what I call the Venus phase, which would be day 4 through day 14, or even day 16 of your cycle if you're a real superstar, where you've got 10 to 12 days of just the most optimal fat loss time frame. You feel good. You can eat more dietary fat. You're actually more efficient at burning dietary fat and burning fat for fuel during that Venus period than you would be going into the progesterone elevated after the follicular, after ovulation. And again, what Dr. Alex said, the left behind phase is what we want to call it, right? The left behind phase, where when you shift to that higher progesterone time frame, we kind of want to look for that to be a week maybe where you do a higher carb cycle. So I do that with a lot of my athletes that
Mhm.
are very intense because I want them to be able to train really well the 3 weeks that they have the opportunity, because I know that that last week before the cycle, everything kind of starts to downshift.
Yep.
Stress drops. Now we've got, elevated progesterone. They feel more bloated. Again, like you said, I get that comment once in a while. So what I do is for people that love to train, and especially doing squats and deadlifts and compounds, I'll ask them to kind of cut those back just a little bit and not go as heavy, only because I know that the damage it's going to cause. Obviously, if we're going to grow muscle, we have to damage, right? We
Yep.
got to tear and then allow the body to repair. We know that during that time frame, they're probably going to be a little bit more bloated. So I'll have them lower that fiber a little and do a few more simple carbs. Make sure that their feeding increments are very good, because traditionally what we've seen the research show is that most women are a little bit more insulin resistant about 3 or 4 days before they start their cycle and a couple days into it.
Mhm.
I've done a little bit of monkeying around with myself, but again, I'm just one person, right? So I have noticed that it works flawlessly with athletes if we go really hard in that Venus phase from about day 4 through 14. And then I have them taper just a little bit, do a little more high repetition work. If they're feeling exhausted, maybe they didn't get good sleep one night. Because what we know about that lack of sleep during that time frame before the cycle, 2 or 3 days ahead of time, is that a lot of people will feel like they are very unmotivated,
Mhm.
emotional, right? We know that being motivated is an emotion. And they think that they are weak
Yep.
because of it. these little men. They are not little men. You know, again, we're not men. We have all these physiological changes going on. So, you know, after ovulation in that luteal phase, when the estrogen is dropping, progesterone's rising and it's its highest, we are more prone to hunger and infrequent bouts of hunger during that time frame as well. I don't know if you've noticed that, Dr. Alex. I certainly do.
Yeah.
This is the week for me. So I'm like, whoo, I'm hungry. And I don't blame PMS like most women do. Oh, you know, I just ovulated. Oh, PMS is coming. It's not PMS.
No,
It's
it's physiologic changes.
Yeah, where you can eat more calories, your metabolic rate is higher. But again, it's not. It's this beautiful time frame. If you should look at it that way, it's definitely a gift. It's not a gut punch. It's how we treat ourselves in response to that that's going to be the most important thing. Whether you're ready to tap the brakes or not, there are so many things that you can do to kind of keep active during that time frame. And again, you don't have to not lift weights. Just know that if you do lift heavy, you're probably going to feel the side effects way more because your test is not as high as it normally is. And test does so many amazing things for recovery. Again, metabolism, again, balancing out that insulin sensitivity and resistance, if you will. Test is really super important. And that's one of the things, you know, I'm not a big testosterone promoter for women if they don't need it, if they don't need additional. But I will tell you, it is a game changer for some females who have low tests and have had for a long period of time and can't put muscle on. There's a reason for that.
It is a game changer. And that's actually one of the videos that's on this channel. We go through testosterone in young women, why it's low, what to think about. So like what medications do you need to think about? But the other thing to think about with that is mitochondrial function, because your hormones start in your mitochondria.
Yes.
So
100%.
So if you have toxic mitochondria, you're not going to make normal hormone production. And so sometimes it's kind of like the basics, getting back to a little bit of the basics on that to help with that reset.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women are just so jet set on fat loss because it's always been their goal. There's such a big difference too between, are you lifting in a fat loss phase or are you lifting in a building phase? They're two totally different things. If you're lifting in a fat loss phase, you probably shouldn't start your diet anytime near that luteal phase. You're going to be more hungry, you know. I would definitely start dieting someone during the cycle a little bit, maybe closer to that day 3 or 4, and then that first week coming out, because they're probably going to feel a lot more satiated. And I always look at that too in my 7-day data review with people. I'll ask my ovulating or my women that are usually ovulating close to when they start with me, could we please start next week? This is why. And then they're like, oh gosh, I never thought about that. And I'm like, you just won't have as much hunger and better satiation. So, you know, and you'll be able to learn how to meal pair, which I will be honest with you, once people learn how to meal pair and eat for training, you can outdo a lot of the side effects that the lagging hormones or the higher hormones or the shifting hormones will cause during training, because you outsmarted the system.
Yes, you can.
By feeding.
You can. You know? I will tell you that when I first started with you, you told me, because I didn't eat enough calories, you told me that I was not allowed to train without eating. And I didn't like this recommendation at all. I'm not going to lie to you. Didn't like it.
Nobody does.
It changed things. And I don't eat effectively before training. I honestly train like crap. Like it's
oh gosh, yes.
And so I think that that's really important to also teach women, is that you can't just show up and expect your body to perform the same every single day, but you also can't show up and give your body nothing and expect it to make something from nothing.
Right, exactly. And because we've got such high estrogen too, you know, before we go into the beautiful insulin sensitive phase, before cycle happens, a lot of women too think that this is like a heat flash or a hot flash. And they come to you and they say, oh, my hormones must be out of whack. But what they don't, they're just not conscientious about these changes in our hormones. They don't know what it is. So they're very, you know, some people are very in tune with their body, while others are like, well, this is kind of different. Well, metabolism changes as we age.
Mhm.
It also changes or can change with the amount of restrictive dieting that we've done. So I love when women tell me that they're going to start implementing strength training into their program, like you did, Dr. Alex,
Yes.
because unanimously, when they start adding the strength training and they tap the brakes on all this cardio, they now are starting to look more and more like what the picture that they showed me, what they would like to look like. They are starting to move that direction. Finally, it's a little bit of a process trying to get somebody to change that old bad programming
Mhm.
that they have had in their brain about cardio.
Mhm.
But the hormonal benefits of strength training, I mean, you can talk about it. What does it do for
Huge.
growth hormone?
Yep.
Huge.
Yep, they're huge for your production of testosterone, for your production of growth hormone, but also for avoiding things like sarcopenia, which is your loss of muscle as you age. And in
Yes.
women, we don't pay enough attention to that. Like we don't pay enough attention, and sarcopenia is a huge problem in women, and we don't
Huge.
talk about it. And you need to start when you're younger. I mean, you can start when you're older, but
I
it's
wish
easier
I
to
wish
start
I'd
when you're
started when I was younger.
um, yeah, so it's easier to start when you're younger and just build and maintain that muscle. It's always way
Yeah.
easier to maintain than it is to build later.
Right.
Can you talk to me about kind of the metabolic afterburn effect
Yes.
of weight training versus cardio, and then does that
Yeah.
change throughout your cycle?
Actually, I have not seen any studies on that
Okay.
specifically. So I can't answer that. But I can answer the afterburn in a general respect. And I can also reference adaptive cardio as well, because it's such a hard conversation for me to have with endurance athletes that have been doing endurance training for 20 years. And they're like, when I was younger, I used to run and I would lose weight. And I'm like, your hormones were optimal. You have adapted 19 years ago to this exercise. Okay. Cardio and particularly endurance, running, swimming, biking, if that's something that you do all the time, your body is going to adapt to it very quickly. Thus, if you aren't feeding enough, what's going to happen is the metabolism will actually drop to accommodate for the loss in calories because it wants to keep itself at homeostasis.
Yep.
So what ends up happening over time is it drops, you underfeed, you are now at a plateau, so you eat less, it drops again. You eat less because you see yourself gaining because you're not eating calorie balance every day. You keep gaining, you keep doing more, the metabolism keeps dropping. Every time you add more and eat less, that metabolism shifts down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's like your car doesn't have enough gas in it anymore to perform optimally. You never top that tank out.
Mm-hmm.
Never ever top the tank out, right? So we never know how great that performance in that car could be and the duration that it can go because you're always filling up a little tiny bit of gas every day, right? Well, cardio, you might have a higher metabolic rate. Now, let's say you just do cardio once or twice a week. Your metabolic rate might stay high for an hour or two after cardio, or maybe even 3 if you're somebody that has a lot more muscle mass. But the afterburn for weightlifting can be up to 24 hours. And all the new research is showing that in a lot of women, especially untrained women, when they first start, the reason they see such great results is because the metabolism is picked up. We don't have an adapted phase yet.
Mm-hmm.
We have not hit an adapted phase. That's why I love strength training, because you can change your training every 2 or 3 months or every 6 to 8 weeks if you want to, with these macro cycles and mesocycles. And you can change it just like you would change your nutrition so that you do not adapt. And that's why I think adaptation is one of the most important words in hypertrophy training, nutrition. Whatever it is that you do all the time, your body is going to adapt to. Whatever it is that you eat all the time, your body is going to adapt to. Whatever, and you see it a lot with the food sensitivity testing, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Whatever you eat a lot of is probably going to come up high on the food sensitivity test, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing. I like strength training because I think that you can do it in so many different ways. You can go to a boot camp and do a circuit training. You could go to CrossFit and you can gear it towards your level. You can scale it. You could do bodybuilding, which for most people is very boring. But we have different types of people. I'm an introvert. I'm like you, Dr. Alex. I want that hour of me time.
Yeah.
I don't like training with other people much during that me time.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with that. But then there are days where I love and I go to F45 and I high five my teenagers from ASU and we have a great workout and I fellowship and I get out of my office, and that's my introverted extrovert. But then I'm ready to go back to doing my workout on my own by myself, because I love bodybuilding, but I also love circuit training because I see the benefit of cycling both into my routine, because sometimes I like to be a little bit leaner. Heavy lifting does that for me. Okay. For some people, higher intensity interval training is what they enjoy with their weight training. That's okay. As long as you're getting the volume and your sets in, it doesn't matter if you do it at 80% to failure, you just have to get the volume in, you know? Yep. And so do your weight training the way you like it, and then push yourself outside your comfort zone and do something different. Perfect. Because then you will not be adapting to all these similar training phases, right? And then you could do bodybuilding if you have maybe a trainer that you like to do it with, and they teach you all the methodology behind it, why you're, you know, starting out with high repetitions until you build your core up better. But the potential with weight training for aesthetic changes in the way you look is 80%, in my opinion, of the game. The rest of it is conditioning, you know, as far as training is concerned, but the base of the pyramid is your nutrition.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter how hard you work out. If your caloric intake is not where it needs to be for muscle building, you won't build muscle, especially if you're female. Males, they have it a little bit better in the sense that they have more testosterone, but still men will not build muscle either until they are at their maintenance or higher. You know, usually some people can fall a little under maintenance calories and they'll start putting muscle on. We call those genetic freaks, right? But for the most part, we've got to be in a calorie deficit that is sustainable for fat loss. And we need to be in a calorie surplus that's maintainable, limiting body fat regain so that we can build lean body mass. We do not need to dirty bulk. We don't need to eat junk food. We don't need to listen to a trainer that says you just need to get your calories in. It would be better to have a map and follow that map and get there and not have a whole bunch of crazy unnecessary pit stops along the way, if you know what I mean, than, you know, to fall off course. So, you know, that's what I think. I will tell you, strength training, and I'm not trying to be biased, but you read all the literature and you read all the studies, hands down, it is going to be one of the most important aspects of your health scope as you age.
I 100% agree with that. And I think when you're looking at those, when you look at the aging population, right, the people that do the best in the aging population are people who maintain activity, but more than maintain activity, the people who do the best are the people who maintain their muscle mass. And your risk for falling, your risk for fracture, your risk for osteoporosis, all of those things go down dramatically as you age. And in women, we really have to think about that.
We do.
Because I think
we leach too more, don't we, Dr. Alex? Women tend to leach a little bit more of their mineral intake, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a long time since I took this class, so I'm like so focused on, you know, cells and microbiology right now.
Well, and women, we know that younger women, that's when you're gonna maintain and build your bones the best.
Right.
Estrogen
that's what I meant.
Important for that. And so as estrogen declines, your bone mass, that's when your bone mass really starts to decline. That's when your ability to build bone also declines. And so the more muscle you have earlier, the better we know that you can maintain your bone mineral density as you age.
Right. And as you say that, the number one question that I receive on Instagram every week is, should I be taking collagen? So I want to add this in as a caveat right now. If you think you're going to build bone mass and skeletal skeletal mass and hair and nails, it would probably be better to do a complete protein, like an isolate that maybe is a dairy-free or lactose-free. You won't find a dairy-free isolate.
Yeah.
That has, it is an absolute complete amino profile.
Yes.
Where collagen is not. Collagen is not bad. So I think people take things so extreme, like, oh, well, Kelli said isolate's better. Well, it is better if we want to work on building muscle and keeping it. And as we start to lose that lean body mass, the most important macro for a lot of these aging people is protein. And we see that in the data now. They are doing these research studies on the elderly now, instead of just the obese population, which is awesome. They're doing it on bodybuilders now. They're doing it on the specific populations, but it's very expensive to do research in specific populations because of the funding. So I love it. You know, we need to know what to do to keep our elderly people, who we should actually be protecting and, you know, financially supporting with our, let's not get into that today. But we really need to help these people because they just don't know what to do. They've never been taught.
They don't. Well, and you know what? I think it's more of a recent trend for women to actually want to train and to start thinking about strength, because before it was literally just eat a salad and run.
Yeah.
And you don't know why you can't lose weight or.
Right. Social media has been good in that respect. It has. Social media has brought about this Fitspo. You know, and women are not afraid to go in the weight room now. I love this. I always told the women back in 2012, when I first, you know, started my nutrition company, I said, go to the gym and do this observation for me, make this observation for me, look at the people that are on the cardio, and then look at the people in the weight room. Who would you rather look like?
Yep.
Unanimously, they came back and they were like, wow. The heaviest people are on the cardio. I said, I know. I know.
And one of the things that we are going to talk about in a future episode is going to be training for the female body, because it's the same as training for a male body. And I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of people make when they first start training, is they don't pick the right trainer. They don't pick somebody that can actually train for a female figure, and then they get worried about so that's going to be a future episode.
Yeah, and I see a lot of, you know, we should get Dr. Madden on this one too, because I see a lot of women that push it like they're little men and they're injured. And now they can't train for several years at the capacity that they would have been able to, because now they're injured, because some Tom, Dick, or Harry who doesn't even have a training certification is showing them the incorrect way to do these exercises. Not only that, you know, the girl says, well, I want a small waist. And then they've got the girl over there doing side bends to widen the waist.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's going to be a really important thing to talk about.
Yeah, so, everybody's built differently. So we should talk about everybody being built differently. And, you know, I can't wait for that episode. I think Dr. Matt will be so good on that one, because he sees a lot of unnecessary rehabs. That are very time consuming and costly rehabs, because, you know, these people have been workout warriors when they didn't need to be that gung-ho. They could have taken a more moderate approach with it. Like, yes, let's be serious and let's be committed, but let's not be so committed that nothing else matters in life.
Yes. And I think that brings me to one of my next points. So when it comes to training and exercise, one of the things that which is why we're doing this episode, is one of the things that I think women need to get better at is giving themselves a little bit of grace. Part of that is also understanding when your energy is a bit low, when you're not feeling good after working out. So one of the things that we know is that cortisol production, right? If you're going to produce cortisol, you're going to bypass making testosterone, and you're going to bypass making progesterone, which is why stress is one of the number one reasons women do not ovulate. And you are going to make cortisol. Well, one of the things that can stress the body out is actually over-exercising.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to what you're telling women, like if you're giving them a guideline, what's your guideline on the beginning of the cycle? How many times per week should you be exercising?
Sure.
What kind of addition?
That's a great question. And I can give you generalizations because everybody's a little different. Like I treat my menopausal and perimenopausal women a little bit differently.
Yes.
Usually my perimenopausal women or women who are already through menopause, I have them do a 1 on 1 off, 2 on 1 off, or 2 on 2 off cycle.
Okay.
That's a pretty easy thing to do, and they love it because working out is not a job anymore, and someone has given them permission to take a day off.
Yes.
Everybody needs to have recovery days unless you are in your 20s, and if you do not take recovery days in your 20s, there's probably a very good chance that you're going to be burnt out with the gym at some point in your life. You're not just going to be so motivated to go to the gym every day for the rest of your life if you work out like that. Very few people are like that. I would say 1%. So with Gen Pop, and let's just say people under 45 to 50, what I normally do is 2 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off. Okay. And I have them take and every 3 or 4 weeks, I have them take 2 days off in a row so they can see their lowest trending scale weight on the scale. And that's their true scale weight without inflammation, most realistically, you know, most realistically. And they're like, oh my gosh, I feel phenomenal. Whenever I take those 2 days off, I train so well the next 2 days. And I'm like, well, then maybe you found your groove. Maybe you do 2 on, 2 off, 1 on, 1 off, 2 on, 2 off, and you just keep your cycle like that. So it's really, to be honest, really specific to the person, just like nutrition, the way that I listen to their feedback about their training sessions. But unanimously, if they have not slept well, they will literally hit me up and be like, hey, coach, I did not sleep well. Should I take the day off? They're waiting for permission. And I'm like, well, how do you feel? Are you exhausted? Do you have your meals prepped for tomorrow? No, I don't have any of that stuff. And I'm really stressed out tonight because my daughter and son have to go to this. Take the day off. Allow yourself that mental break from obligation and know that that one session is not going to kill you. It isn't going to kill you. You know, missing a session is not going to kill you. Missing a week is not going to kill you. If you go on vacation and you don't do anything but walk and enjoy yourself, that's 1 week out of your life. You're not going to lose your gains. You're not going to lose your gains, you know? So people that track macros, they might accommodate for that vacation by saying, well, I'm not going to be very active, which active people are usually active on vacation too. They just are. But sometimes people want to have a break and they do just want to turn their phone off like you and Matt do and just relax. And they get right back into that groove the next week. It's not that they stop. They get right back into it. So whatever works, if you are exhausted or you haven't slept well, I would say nutrition would be 10 times more important and getting to bed on time. And then the next day, if you still feel pretty fatigued, maybe you don't go as hard as you normally would in your workout. And maybe you do a 30-minute lifting session and you do some walking. That's much better than nothing. Something versus nothing is better than nothing, you know?
What I tell my clients is if you work out and afterwards you feel like you just drained everything from yourself and you're exhausted, that's your body telling you something. That's your body saying, hey, we don't have what we need to be able to do this. Now, frequently that is nutritional, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's more hormonal. It's sleep, it's cortisol, it's testosterone, it's those, like, all those hormones. And so if your body's telling you something.
And a lot of times, Dr. Alex, I will feed people more during the time frames where they are exhausted to see if it's just because if they've slept well, but they've been pushing it really hard in the gym and maybe their metabolic rate is higher more frequently and for longer periods of time, why wouldn't I just say, hey, you know what? Let's do 25 extra grams of carbs every single day until you check in next. Oh, they are now going to have probably a little bit more energy because their body isn't using just what it needs to keep them in a fat loss phase. Now they've got a little more in reserve. And they still got that stored glucose in the muscle and the liver, but they have a little bit more energy that is ready to be used, especially during that carb burning phase for women right before they go into the cycle. You know, again, that metabolic rate, we might as well use that body temp being up. Thermic effect of food is higher during that time frame. There's all these cool things that happen. So it's hard because we kind of slay the beast and we're like, PMS it sucks. You don't know what I'm going through. But if you outsmart the system
Yeah.
and you really do eat for your cycle and your training, and you tap the brakes and maybe give yourself a little bit more time off 2 days before the cycle and 2 days in, that's when I don't do hardly anything but walking, because I have autoimmune. I feel it the most 2 or 3 days before my cycle and 1 or 2 days in. And
Yep.
those are just days where I'm, I might go do some single body weight training, bodybuilding. I really feel like I did nothing, but you know what? That's mental. That's a mental thing.
Yep.
For me, we can't always be 100%. So 80 is going to be just good enough on those days,
I completely agree with that. So
same thing with food.
Yeah. So in terms of kind of recapping the things that we've gone over, when you're thinking about, like, if you're somebody watching this video right now at home, things to think about when you're looking at exercise is definitely adding in weight training.
Yes.
Adding in weight training is one of the best things that you can do long-term and short-term for both physique and health. So
yes.
That's one of the number one things that we would recommend. And
yes.
then in terms of when the beginning part of your cycle, day 5 to 14, 5 to 16 is going to be when you're going to lift the best, when you're going to have the best recovery, and when you're going to get the best kind of gains in the gym.
Yeah, and even after that Venus time frame, there's about a 4 or 5 day window where I find that most women hit those PRs. So don't sell yourself short. That time frame where you can eat more carbs, you might find yourself hitting even more PRs, that little window there before you go into the death zone, you know?
Yeah. And that, I think, was something that a lot of women need to hear, or something that you said that I think is super important for women, is that when you go into the second half of the cycle, your metabolism is actually going to be higher. And so not constantly kind of going, okay, well, I'm in the second half of my cycle, so everything is bad. You actually have a higher metabolic rate. And then, when you're on your period, really giving yourself a little bit more grace. Just dial it back a bit, and then start back up day 5, like around day 5.
You got it. Yep. Pump those brakes. Don't feel bad about it. Catch up on your sleep, catch up on some reading, catch up on your family. I always tell my clients, psychologically, use that 4 or 5 days, the 2 days before, 2 or 3 days in, to just really maintain the other 4 top priorities in your life other than fitness.
Yes.
Okay. I'm like, whatever you are putting off or putting at the back burner, that's what you want to do on those days, and don't feel bad about it. And if you get a walk in or you get a 30-minute full body, high repetition work, cool. If you want to go on a hike with someone, cool. Get out of the house, do something different, especially right now. I mean, not for us in Arizona as much because it's still 104 during the daytime.
Yeah.
Like bipolar, right?
For this cool down.
We're like, what? I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But everybody else around the US right now, and again, we're filming this the 1st of October. It's September 30th today. You guys have pretty awesome weather right now to be outdoors.
Yes.
That's a great thing to use during your cycle is, get out in your garage if you've got that set up and do those workouts out in the garage, or, go out in the sun, get your vitamin D, go for your walk. If you have a dog, maybe you do 2 walks. You do 1 in the morning, 1 at night, and just get in a pattern where that's going to be enough when you're not feeling like you can do more.
Yes. Absolutely.
And at the intensity. So yeah, great recap, Dr. Alex. I think, going into a little bit more detail on how you can go wrong because women are not little men, that's going to be a great episode.
Yes. So definitely stay tuned for our future episodes that we're going to be doing with Kelli. We are going to be talking about how to train the female body, because we are not men and we need to honor that. But we're also going to be diving into—
I wish we were, right? It would be so much easier.
It'd be so much easier, right? Like our consistent hormones, no, we don't have that. And then we are going to be diving into some of the dietary things, because when it comes down to it, you cannot out-train a bad diet.
Oh,
but
man.
I want to say thank you, Kelli. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alex. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, we appreciate you, and we're excited to have you back on again in the future. And
we'll see.
You guys like this video, make sure to hit the like button and hit subscribe so you know when our new videos are coming.